Hello, and thanks for joining me again as I dive into the wacky world of Azure Synapse Analytics. And there's been some news. We finally have Git integration. We can finally do source control. And it's been one of the most hotly requested features. People have been banging on the door saying, guys, can we please get some kind of source control? Just please, any kind of source control. And I'm glad to say it is now in there. So whether you saw the flurry of activity on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on their blogs, whatever, it is finally here. So I'm going to quickly just show you what it is, how it works. If you're used to using Data Factory, this will all seem very familiar to you. And we'll go through a quick, how do you set up source control and how do you make sure you don't lose all of those notebooks and SQL scripts and pipelines and all of that good stuff. We're not going to do the full CI/CD story today. I'll show you where the ARM templates are. You deploy the ARM templates just like ADF, but I'll mainly show you just how, really quickly, how to set up source control, how to save all your code so you don't lose it, how to commit things, and how that all sits together. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe if this is a useful video, and drop us some comments down below if there are better ways of doing it, if it gives you a few ideas, if you are like, yeah, cool, and we'll go from there. So let's have a look. Okay, so I have my traditional advancing Synapse spelt wrong from the very start of this video series, but you know, it's too late for me to bother correcting it now. And this is not currently hooked up to anything. So I can go around, I've got a load of data sets I've saved, I've got things in my workspace, so lots of kind of linked Hive databases on the Spot side, SQL on command database. There's lots of things in here. I've got SQL scripts, I've got notebooks. Basically, there's a load of code that I've just been building up over time as I do these videos that I've not saved. That if anything goes wrong, I just lose. I don't have any way of getting them out, aside from going through and copying and pasting into individual one, which is horrendously painful. So, yeah, it's been an issue. People looking at this thing going, how can we not have source control? But I am glad to say it is now in there. So we have this thing at the top. We have, just like Data Factory, right? We've got this little thing saying, do you want to be looking at the currently deployed code, or do you want to be looking at the representation of code that is in a specific branch of your source code repo, be that GitHub, be that Azure DevOps? So you've got that currently set up. And this is what you'll probably see. If you haven't set up yet, you'll be defaulting to Synapse Live, and it'll be saying set up code repo if you want to. Now I'm going to switch over to Azure DevOps. I'm going to create a quick new project that we can use for this. So it's going to be advancing Synapse, just to keep it consistent. I'm going to private, I'm going to make it Scrum, and we can just create it from there. So that's going to create me a whole new project with a blank empty repo inside there. So what I want to do is, inside my DevOps project, go down into my repos, and I'll see it's empty. What do you want to do? Add some code. I'm just going to kind of do a quick initialize. I'm going to initialize it in Python style. And all that does is it puts a quick basic README file in there, and it adds a git ignore. So if I'm doing any Python builds, it's going to ignore that kind of stuff. Not that we're doing that, it's just kind of habit ingrained if I'm kicking off a repo now. Okay, so I have a DevOps project. I've got a main branch, and that's it. And I've got a repo that is made. So automatically inside my whole project, so I've got my organization right at the top, which is my advanced analytics. I've got my advancing Synapse project, and inside advancing Synapse, I've got that separate repo, a little hierarchy of things that we're working with. And so what we need to do is that kind of juggling act of saying, I've got my load of stuff deployed into Synapse currently. I've got an empty repo just waiting for some code to come in so that it can keep it for me and I can not lose my code in future. And now I need to sync them up. So it's a few different ways. We can just do it from that drop down at the top. So I can go Synapse Live. I want to set up a code repo. I can also, via the little kind of management briefcase, toolbox, I guess it is. But I prefer management briefcase. I can go into there, and I've got this thing down at the bottom. I've now got Git configuration. So I can go in and say, I want to set up source code. I want to hook it up to some kind of repo in the back. So if we click that, yes, I want to discard the changes of when I was messing around earlier. That is fine. And then I need to set up my info. So I can do it GitHub or Azure DevOps. I've got my stuff in Azure DevOps for now. So choose that. Which Active Directory you want. So I'm just going to choose my default one that I'm logged in as. And I'm going to click continue. slightly different than the ADF one. There's now 2 menus rather than just 1 menu, but that'll be fine. I'm going to choose my account. So I'm going to go onto that main org, which is that Advancing Analytics. I'm going to choose that one that we just created, that Advancing Synapse. And then pick the repo. And again, the repo is just by default called the same as my overall project. I could have, if I was in here, I could have just set up new repositories. So I can create code separation if I want to have, well, there's all my metadata. There's my main Synapse project. There's a load of bits that offer some Azure functions that are deployed in a database project. I can separate that stuff out should I wish to. For now, I'm just leaving it all in one main project. Okay, we've then got a collaboration branch. So coming from ADF, we've got this idea of there's the branch that people are generally working on. So people are going in, looking at the current code, looking at the active code. That'll be your collaboration branch. And that's where you're doing a publish. That's where you basically kind of compile all of your different JSON objects into the ARM templates ready to be published. So collaboration branch shouldn't really be main. I'm going to call that development. So we'll have this kind of code line, which is our dev code space. And then we have a publish branch. And this is just the slightly bizarre way that Data Factory works, where so it creates a branch inside your repository, and that branch looks nothing like the rest of your repo. So normally if you're working with source code, you normally expect a repo, and you've got different branches in your repo that are essentially, I'm going to take an exact carbon copy of all the code, my whole solution in there, going to make a copy of it, make some changes, test those changes in isolation, and then take those changes and merge them back in. And that's how we normally use branching. Branching is used to look at essentially different states of the same code. Now, the way that Data Factory works is it has this idea of a publish branch. And that is in the same repo, it creates a separate branch, but it puts ARM templates in there, and it doesn't have this at all the same structure or files or code that the rest of the branches live in there. So you might have a repo which has, your main, dev, test, code branches, if that's the way you like working. You might just have main if you like that. A lot of feature branches. So whenever someone's working on something, create a feature branch, make your changes, check it back in, do a pull request into your primary code line, but then just this separate branch, which has just ARM templates. That's it. So it's kind of weird. That's just the way it works. It's normally called ADF publish. It's now called workspace publish. Again, if you're used to Data Factory, this is really straightforward. And then inside that dev branch, inside that kind of the branch where it's putting all the code, is there a root folder? Do you want it to just sit entirely within there? Or do you want to have a subfolder that everything's created in? So I'm going to call this Synapse. So whenever it's adding in notebooks and scripts and link services and all these metadata objects, it's going to collect all of them together inside the Synapse folder. So I'm using this repo for other things, then it'll all be connected together. So I don't have to manage that stuff. And I'm going to say import existing resources into the repo. And I'm going to tell it to import it into my development branch. So that's just saying in my Synapse repo, I've already got all those notebooks and SQL scripts and some pipelines and link service. I've got lots of stuff already deployed to Synapse. And what I'm saying is when I create this connection, when I initialize this integration between Synapse and Git, I want to take a copy of all those things and just save it. Please save my code so that I don't lose it in future. Okay, so I'm going to hit apply. It's going to take it away. It's going to check it, making sure we've got access. It's setting up all that stuff. And it's creating that dev branch, and it's taking a copy of my stuff and wrapping it up into a single Git commit and then pushing that into my repo. So the moment this is done, we can go and have a look. There we go. The repo is now connected. I've got a load of info here about that connection, and we should be able to, over on this side, do a quick refresh here to say what's going on inside there. So nothing's happened in main. Again, so I've got one code line, which has got kind of essentially a published version. And then I can go and have a look at my dev branch. I've now got my Synapse subfolder. And inside there, I've got loads of good stuff. I've got all of my notebooks. I've got my SQL scripts. So anything that, all that code I've been slowly building up over time and just super paranoid that something's going to happen, I'm going to lose all that code, I can actually go and get all of that info. I've got credential. I'm going to open that just in case. So lots and lots of good stuff. Essentially, it's just borrowed the exact structure that we expect to see inside ADF, but now it has more things. So it's like the ADF bits of link services and pipelines and data sets, but also notebooks and pipelines and SQL scripts and just the other artifacts that we now get inside that workspace experience. So awesome. Actually, now if I got all my thing. And then you can see I've got, because I'm in my dev branch, if I had my dev branch in this workspace and I had a test Synapse, a prod Synapse, a UAT, all these different ones, then if I wanted to take my dev code and apply it into my main code, that's what we do the pull request for, right? So that's me saying, I've updated development. I want to do a pull request, taking my development code, so everything that's in that dev branch, into my main code. So I want to say, I'm now happy with how dev looks, push all those changes and commit them across. So this is my initial main sync. I'm going to say, yes, I want to create that pull request. It's doing a merge, doing some stuff. I want to complete it. I don't want to delete that dev branch. So essentially, I want to maintain that dev, maintain that master, complete that, going off, merging things across. And then I've got like that idea of promoting between different branches. And if I wanted to have things like CI/CD, if I wanted to have a deployment pipeline, all of that good stuff, I could do that triggering when main receives a load of code. When a pull request happens, gets a load of code, pushes it into my main branch, I can have that trigger and go, hey, look, I've got a load of changes, push that out and deploy it to my workspace. So again, I'm now inside that main branch and I've got Synapse and all of my data and all of that good stuff. So good. I can actually take a copy of my code and I can save it, and I've got history. I've got an audit trail of when people changed it. That's great. So I can go in over here, back in Synapse, and I can say I want to create a new notebook. It's going to be my notebook name is going to be my Git test. Load of stuff. Get rid of that. I'm going to just add a bit of code. Say, print hello. And then we've now got this commit button, which is interesting that they've now adopted very Git terminology, because over in Data Factory land, that's just called save. You just go around, save my changes, save. And all that does is that basically commits your changes into the repo. And then you've got publish, which is very different. So we've got commit and publish. And publish does a couple of things. So because we've got this idea of viewing what's in the repo, essentially this is acting as a script editor when all I'm doing is editing repo files. And there's still the idea that I have my development environment published and code that is actually deployed into that dev environment. And that's the difference between having this dev branch and having that live mode. So live mode is what's currently deployed and working, and everyone else who logs into Synapse in this workspace can see what's deployed into that live mode. Whereas people in different branches, people in who haven't saved their changes yet, they wouldn't see each other's changes. You're in like a local session until you commit it to the repo, and then you see what else is happening in that branch. And it's only when you're in Synapse Live that you see what has been deployed and is currently working. So if you're trying to do things like that, if you wanted to have dev set up so it still triggers on a regular basis, you want to have it doing a nightly load so you can be testing things, those things have to be deployed. And to deploy is when you hit that publish button and it pushes it from whatever branch you're currently in into that live mode. I think you have to be in the collaboration branch in order to do it to deploy. So I do that and I commit all. Okay, so that's saving down my changes. So it's not deployed it. So if I switch to Synapse Live, I shouldn't see Git test. So if I go into live mode, there we go. So I no longer have that Git test. That hasn't been deployed. It's in my repo. It's saved my code. It hasn't deployed it to the live copy of my workspace. So I switch over back into my DevOps project. I can go to my development branch. I can have a look in notebooks, and I can see Git test. I can see that has changed. I can see when it got updated. I can go and see what's inside it. Got loads of info about actually a lot of settings, right, for what's actually happening inside it. And you can see the code that's in there. So you can print hello. So actually, we can see all the metadata that's encapsulating inside that notebook and how it's building on the notebook. Pretty cool. And that's saved down to development. So it's saved it, it's kept a copy of it, but it's that important differentiation to get right of saying it's not deployed to my dev environment. I wrote it in my dev environment, I saved my code down to my repo, but it's not active, it's not published inside my dev space. So if I switch back into Git mode, my discard things. Okay, so I'm in my Git test. Again, just to commit, make sure that's all committed. It's fine, seems good. And I can hit publish. Now that is taking those changes. It's saying, okay, there's some changes that need to be synced. So it gives you a little bit of a differential. So saying, based on the branch that I'm currently in, that I'm trying to push into my Synapse Live. Here's the changes. So I've edited one notebook, I think accidentally, and I've got a new notebook that I've added. So when I hit OK, that's what's going to be pushed from my current collaboration branch into my live deployed version of that workspace. And this does two things. So firstly, it does this deployment. It gets that code, wraps it up, puts it into my Synapse Live so I can then use it programmatically. You can add it to schedules, can have triggers, all of that good stuff. But also, it uses that workspace publish branch. So you can see it's finished publishing. So it's successfully taken those code artifacts, pushed it into live. It then does this thing. So it's generating templates. So it's creating those ARM templates. So it's the Azure Resource Manager. Essentially, anything infrastructure as code, anytime we're trying to programmatically deploy things inside the Azure ecosystem, we use these things called ARM templates. Essentially, just a load of JSON that describes an object. Normally, originally used for things, if you want to deploy actual resources, a whole new Synapse workspace, a database, a data factory, then you can deploy it using ARM templates. Now, Data Factory took that same thing and said, well, we're going to deploy the actual solutions. So your linked services, your pipelines, your data sets, we're going to wrap those up inside an ARM template and deploy those as well. And they've taken that same idea here. So inside our notebook, now that we've hit publish, we'll see this additional branch. Now, and it is super confusing because in this branch, in both my main and development, we've got this subfolder called Synapse, we've got notebooks, we've got this folder structure, and they are kind of synced. Every time we do a pull request, they're synced, but generally they are kind of the same structure. If we go over into our workspace publish, it'll go, that's not there's no such thing as that Synapse notebook. Because if we go back to the top level, it's because it has its own entirely independent folder structure. So between dev, I can see Synapse, I can see my README, I can see those things. Main, because I've synced them, very similar. But then workspace publish is a law unto itself. So it's got this advancing Synapse, so it's named it with the workspace name. Go in there, and it's created these two things. So it's got my deployment details. Essentially, it's got a giant ARM template that tells it how to deploy that. You can see the notebooks that are being deployed. You can see essentially anything that is inside my workspace. It's got as a gigantic ARM template for deploying it. So I've not actually tried any of this stuff yet. And that's going to be interesting because deploying an ARM template is the most basic, most off-the-shelf thing that a deployment pipeline can do. And when I'm inside DevOps and I've got my whole pipeline section, I can create a pipeline. And one of the off-the-shelf things is deploy ARM. So pointing at these resources, pointing at a blank Synapse environment and saying, off you go. It's going to be interesting to see how much that works just straight out of the box. How well it can take, it looks like it's got the notebook code in there. That's part of that ARM template. So it looks like all of my different objects, even things that wouldn't normally be deployed by ARM, have been wrapped into this ARM template resource. So it looks like you can just deploy it. But I'll be playing with that over the next few days and seeing how nicely that works. But at least I have all my code. So it is all nicely integrated. I can do things like feature branching. So if I wanted to go, you know what, I'm going to make a change. I don't want to break everyone else's code. I'm going to create a new branch. It's going to call my assignment feature. And I've got a work item 42 that I'm working with. I can create that branch. And I can work in here and go, actually, I want this to be world instead. Now that would have broken other people's changes maybe, but because I'm doing it in my own feature branch, I can then commit that change. And that hasn't changed my dev branch, hasn't changed what's published. And I can be working in here, I can be testing things, I can be running it, which is running my little local dev session without actually affecting things. So if I go back into my DevOps space, I've got my feature branches now created. I can go in there, go back into the root folder. It's in Synapse, I can see my notebook. I can see inside that git test has just been updated. And I can see that's been updated, that print world. But then I can compare it and go, well, in my dev branch, that's still print hello. So I've got my ability straight through the workspace to say, I'm going to try a few things, but I don't want to break the actual code that other people are working on. Or maybe two of us are going to collaborate on a thing and we don't want to break the rest of the team. And we can just spin up a feature branch, play around with it, work with it. And if we like that, we say, you know what? That's the way we want to do it. We've tested everything. It all works. And create a pull request. The same as we did moving from our dev to push that release into main. I can take my feature branch, merge it into my development. So I'm just updating that one thing. It's nice and easy. Create it. So it's going to pull other things, just check there's no merge conflicts. It could do approvals. I'm going to complete it. In this case, I want to delete that feature branch once I'm finished. So it's going to take that code, merge that code back into my main development branch, and then get rid of it. So if I switch back into my development branch, that now says world. So that whole ability to feature branch and say, I'm going to create a little separate siloed workflow, do as many horrible breaking changes as I want, test and play with it, only when it's happy and not going to break everything else, I can go, yeah, cool, that works, and then merge it back in. So it's at least nice that we've got that same functionality all baked in here of being able to switch between branches, being able to create a pull request, take a feature branch, merge it in, be able to compare to what's deployed. That all seems quite nice. So the main problem people are going to have is just remembering to hit that commit button. So if you're in and you make a load of changes, just going, right, okay, I don't want to lose that. Just remembering to hit that commit button so it actually gets synced back to your repo. That's it. And if you try and leave the page, it'll say, you've got changes you've not saved. Gonna try and close that. Changes that have to be saved. Like, oh, I've not committed. So it's trying to do what it can to say, make sure you save your code, which is great because we didn't have anything like that before. So it's good that we've now got that baseline. If you're playing around, if you're having a bit of a hack, if you're experimenting, you can at least use a feature branch to separate it, but still save your code. You can do things in your main branch and your dev branch and still save your code. So that's a real improvement. That's really, really nice to see. So yeah, that's it. That's all I wanted to show you. It's just simply, it's kind of the same as Data Factory. It works the same way. The process is going to be the same in that you'll hit publish, it'll commit them into the thing, it'll get them into the live, it'll then go back and create an ARM template so you can use the exact same release artifacts to push into test, UAT, prod. And that is huge, right? So rather than having to do a diff, rather than having to say, right, okay, I'm going from test into prod, I'm going to build out some Delta scripts and make a separate thing, and then you've got to test it and there's all that pain, you can say, here is an ARM template, deploy that to test and test it, obviously. But then you've got that same object that you've tested, that you've already gone through the whole process, and it's the exact same deployment artifact that you can push into a different environment and check it. And because it's baked into the whole Git or Azure DevOps process, you can have approvals. You can make it so it deploys automatically via CI/CD pipelines. It's pumped in like a professional tool, which I'm very, very, very happy to see finally happen. I'm slightly annoyed it's taken this long. But it's still improving. If it had gone, if it had gone live, it had gone to GA, and we didn't have this kind of thing, we didn't have Git baked into it, that would have been super, super worried. But it all seems fairly reasonable. It's all baked in how we expect Data Factory to work. It's got the niceties of being able to do feature branching and pull requests. So yeah, all pretty good. So have a look, have a play around, try and break it. You might be able to, we'll see. Let us know what you think. And yeah, I'll be having a little bit of a play and trying to essentially take those ARM templates and programmatically deploy it. So I want to try and actually say, well, okay, here's our dev area, here's our test, here's our prod, and kind of mock up a deploy it to test, do a pull request, deploy it to prod, make sure that works. And I'll be doing that over the next week or so, and we'll see how that works. As usual, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let us know down in the comments what you think, and if that's useful, if you think it's good enough, we'll like to see. Otherwise, we'll see you soon. Cheers.